So, I said earlier that there's a kind of odd thing that we'll have to do today. And every year, every congregation in the Church of Scotland has to have a meeting, an annual stated meeting. The slight problem with it is that nobody knows what you're meant to do at it. Now, that seems a bit daft to me, that you have a meeting, but you don't actually know what you're meant to do when you're there. So this is it. This is that meeting. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to do. It used to be a meeting where everybody got a copy of the accounts for the year for the congregation. And then we went through it together and discussed why we had spent this on that and so on. But we've already done that now because the Kirk session, the elders have already done that and agreed the accounts. But for some reason, when the church decided that you were allowed to do that, they didn't take away the need to have an annual meeting. So, we have a meeting, and this is it. So that's why at the end of the meeting, if you want to see some of the figures from the congregation, if you're a member of the congregation, then you can have a copy as you go. I'm going to give you some of the little bits about it, because I have to just mention a little bit. But really, what I want to do is talk about the church, about what we do, about what we spend, and why we do it. And don't switch off thinking, oh, this is got nothing to do with me, because it has. And I'll tell you why as we go. So, the first question is, what do we do here? So tell me, what are some of the things that as a congregation here we do? Any clues? We support each other. Things that we might spend money on. We don't necessarily need to spend money. The building, we have a building. Absolutely. Now, I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at you, because these are things that we do here. No? Aye. Boys, thank you! The boys' brigade and the girls' brigade, they're part of this congregation. See, it's easy. No, it's not. None of it's hard. Right? So the other things that we do, so if you maybe volunteer for something, you can shout out what you volunteer for. What do we do as part of lunch club? Yeah. Messy church, yeah. Young church, the food bank, the cafe, the friendship knitting group, 24/7 prayer. If you're going through and a wee while after the service, you'll be going for. Okay, somebody has to make that. You know, people were at the door today to give you your sheet and to say hello. People volunteered to do that. We'll be taking out these. Just thought I'd get it in there again. Just to do the deliveries for Christian Aid. We do loads of things, and that's only some of the things that we do in this congregation. And every congregation does very similar things. That's kind of what we do. Not all of it costs money, but some of it does. However, all of it takes people. The cafe's been running for all of these years with people. Volunteers. Volunteers met you at the door. Volunteers have made your coffee. Volunteers will do young church. And we can't do it without the volunteers. It just wouldn't happen. We need folk to volunteer. Boys' brigade and girls' brigade, your leaders don't get paid for that. It wouldn't happen because we couldn't afford it. But they don't get paid. They volunteer. They give up their time to do that. And it doesn't happen without volunteers. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you who volunteer at Boys' Brigade and Girls' Brigade and all of the other things that go on in the life of the congregation. It's really important to acknowledge that it would not happen without you and without the time and the commitment that you make to it. So, the next thing. Last year, this is the very brief summary, we've got £120,000, 713 in. Now that comes from people giving each week in the offering. Some people do that by standing order, but some people still use an envelope and give that way, and that's absolutely fine. But it comes in that way, and it comes in through the cafe. Cafe generates funds for us. So we have different ways of getting money in. And out, I'm not entirely sure that I got that right. I think that should be 119,000 out, not 116. That's my mistake. Out. Eh? Do you know, that's good. Because we get more in than we put out. That's good. Doesn't always happen, but it did. So, the next one. I don't know if you can see that terribly well. It's just to let you know that of that 119,000 that we spent last year, 92,538 were things about which we had no choice. That had to be spent. So that includes the 58-ish, 59 odd next year that we give to Edinburgh. Now, I'm very grateful for that because it goes to pay me. I don't get all of that, you understand, but it goes to pay me and other folks, other ministries, and other work in the church. And every congregation will give money to Edinburgh. So congregations don't pay ministers. Edinburgh pays ministers. But they can only do it because folks in congregations give their money. But that also includes heat and light. There's quite a lot of heat this morning, Robert. He's saying no, there's no heat. Oh, that was cheeky. Did you hear what he said? He said, you just get to that age. I'm not the only one, let me tell you. So, it goes for, it goes to Edinburgh. It goes to keep the place going. It goes to the video licensing and all of that stuff that we use for the songs. And it goes on a whole range of other bits and pieces like the organist. It goes in salaries because we have secretaries and our organist, David. So there are things that before we've done anything else, we know that we have to pay. And so next year it's going to be exactly the same. We're going to have that money to pay out. And you think to yourself, £27,250, that's a lot of money. And it is a lot of money. Until you think that that's got to pay for any repairs, any new equipment that we have to buy. It's got to pay for all the printing and stationery. So each week doesn't cost much, but each week we print stuff off. We have posters, we have banners, we have all sorts of things that we use in the life and work of the church. And so all of a sudden, what we think is a lot of money isn't really so much money. However, we got in more than we put out, and that's good. And so I just want to say again, thank you for that. It's really important that we're able to do the work that our church congregation is meant to do, and to be able to support other folks as they do their work in Scotland and further afield. And all of that is for one purpose. And it is, it's that one there. It's so that we can make disciples. Because that's what Jesus said. That's what the reading was about today. Jesus said to go into the world and to make disciples. To tell other people about God. And that's what we are supposed to do as well. However, that leads to a question, which you've seen already. What is a disciple? Well, when Jesus was alive, a disciple was somebody who thought, you look clever. I think I'll follow you. So I would come and I would sit and I would just wait for you to speak. Because you look clever. Right? You look intelligent. And I would watch and I would wait. And when you spoke, I would hang on your every word. I would even give up my job and I would go and I would sleep outside your door, just in case in the middle of the night you had a really good idea that you wanted to share with me. That's what a disciple did. They gave up everything to follow this person that they thought would be able to teach them and train them and help them to live really well. They lived with them, they ate with them, they spent their time watching them and learning from them. And most of those folk would be called rabbis. The wise people were called rabbis. And they taught people about God. And so the disciples followed them to see what they could learn about God. And it was a really important role, because that was how the knowledge of their history was passed down. So they would tell the stories that we read in the Old Testament about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and about Moses and about Noah and all of that. They would teach all of that history and that story and how Israel came to be a country. They would go over all the battles and about the spies and all of that stuff. And that's how people learned about their history and learned a bit about God. But it was also how new things were taught. So if you had a really clever rabbi, sometimes they come up with a really good new idea. And Jesus, he was a rabbi. He was a teacher. And he had disciples. Now, I know, because I was there on Friday, you won the Bible quiz. Ah! Now, you should never have told me that, because I've got a quiz of my own. Ha ha ha! You guys got off with it until tomorrow. So, here's the quiz. How many disciples did Jesus have? Excellent. What were they called? John was one. Peter. Andrew. Yeah. That's three. Right, who's going to help them? Okay, Matthew. Is that what you're going to say? Thomas. Judas. Thaddeus. No. He wasn't one of the 12. He wasn't one of the 12 either. Bartholomew. Excellent. Bartholomew. We're still 4 short. Thank you. James. Now, I have to be honest, I'm kind of cheating slightly because there were 2 Jameses. Right? There was James, Andrew's brother, James. John's brother, James, who was the son of Zebedee, and there was James, the son of Alphaeus. So there was 2 Jameses. And you said Peter. Somebody said Peter. There was a Simon. So Peter's name was changed. He was really called Simon to start. He became Simon Peter, or just Peter. But there was another Simon, and he was the zealot. Do you know, I was watching the film Ben-Hur last night. It was great. Chariots and all that kind of stuff. It was wonderful. However, there was quite a lot of bits in there about zealots, and they were people who just wanted to get rid of the Romans. They just hated the Romans, and they hated being captive to the Romans, and they just wanted to fight them all the time. Not just the ideal choice for somebody necessarily to be your disciple. He was a troublemaker. And yet, Jesus chose him. So, let me just get this one. Simon, Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, I think was the one we missed, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas. Those were the 12. Peter, Andrew, James, and John were fishermen, and they gave up their fishing to go and follow Jesus. Matthew is quite often called Matthew the tax collector, because let's be honest, nobody liked him. Nobody liked the tax collectors. And he's quite often called Matthew the tax collector. Simon was a political activist and a troublemaker. So they're a pretty mixed bunch. And they very soon realized that Jesus was quite a different kind of teacher to anyone they had met before. Because you see, they didn't really choose him. He chose them. He went to them and said, why don't you follow me? Why don't you come? Come and see what I'm doing. Come and see where I'm staying. Come and see. Come on, come and see. Come on. Come on. It's like the father said, but come on. Right? But that's what he did. Come and see. And so they had to decide, would they go and see? And sometimes he said things that were quite different and totally radical to what they knew or expected. Quite often Jesus said, well, you know, people say, but I tell you. And he changed it round. And he made them think, oh, wow, what a really good thought that is. Things like, love your enemies. Nobody had told them that before. They were supposed to hate their enemies. They were supposed to do an eye for an eye. If somebody hurt you, you were to hurt them back. And Jesus said, no, you have to love your enemies. And then he did something totally different. He sent them out before they were ready, or before they felt ready, before they were fully trained. And he told them to come back, and then they would have a wee chat about what had gone on when they went. So in Matthew chapter 10, I'm hoping it's, there we go, verses 5 and 6, it says, these 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Don't go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go to the lost sheep of Israel. So basically, go to people you know, whose culture you understand, whose language you understand, and go and tell them the great big message that I've got. And you think, oh, yes, I can do that. It must be absolutely brilliant. I've got it all. So, woohoo! Right? So what was the message? Proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. I would be going bit more with that. Wee explanation about that. What does that mean? I don't really get that. But that's what he told them to go and to do. And that's partly because in Israel, people would have understood that what they were saying was, God is about to do something amazing. God's kingdom has come. And he's going to do something fantastic. So they would have understood it in a way that we don't understand it. But then, the next bit is even more interesting. He said, go and tell them that message, and then heal people who are ill, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons, freely you've received, freely give. Now, I went to university to train to be a minister. I do not remember any class where they taught me how to raise the dead. It just did not happen. And yet, Jesus said to his followers, go out, tell them about God, and do these miracles. Do you know what? I don't think it's changed very much. I think that's still what Jesus says to his followers, and I don't think we do that bit of it terribly well, or at least I know I don't. So if that's what disciples were like then, what should we be like now? You see, the whole bit about giving up everything and going and following somebody and watching their every move, you would get arrested for that nowadays. You'll call it stalking. So we don't really do that so much now. And later on in the Bible, they don't even really use the word disciple. Sometimes now people use the idea or the phrase being a follower of Jesus, although it's kind of the same thing. So I've got some words to help us to understand what it is to be a disciple. The first word is decision. You've got to decide. You've got to decide to be a disciple. So when Jesus says, come and follow me, you've got to actually decide. You've got to make that decision. Yes, I'm going to do that, or no, I'm not going to do that. And he still says to us today, do you know what? You've got to follow me. You've got to listen to what I've said. You've got to do what I did, and you've got to live differently in the world. And it means different things for different people. For some, like me, it meant giving up a perfectly good job and coming to this. But you've got to decide, are you willing? Are you willing to do what God calls you to do? Now, it doesn't mean that for everybody. But each day we've got to decide, am I going to follow Jesus today? Am I going to do what he says to me today? So you've got to constantly decide, I'm going to follow Jesus. And then, being a disciple should be inspiring. We should be inspiring. There should be something about us as disciples that makes other folk think, wow, I would like to be like that. That person has something that I don't have and I would like. And the person is different because they know God. In the Bible, we read about Paul. Paul was shipwrecked. He was beaten. He was bitten by a snake. He caused an earthquake. Well, actually, God caused the earthquake, but it was because he was helping Paul. That's quite exciting. I would quite like to live that kind of life where things, big things, really dramatic big things happen because I'm following God. Charles Wesley, he was a minister. And you know, they kicked him out of the church. Didn't like him. They kicked him out of the church. And so he went to preach in the countryside. It wasn't a huge, big, dramatic thing, but he went and he did it because he was following God. Corrie ten Boom was a lady, and she and her sister were put in a concentration camp by the Nazis. And she had to follow God in that place. And there's an amazing wee story of how at one point they got a little brown bottle of medicine. And Corrie wanted to keep it. And she wanted to, I think actually it was vitamins, and she wanted to keep it because her sister was really ill. And she was going to give it to her sister. And her sister said, do you know what? If we're following God, we need to give that, not just to us, but to all of the folk that are here who need it. And Corrie wasn't really for doing that because it was a very small bottle. And every day, for months on end, they prayed and they went and they gave everybody who needed it a little drop of the medicine. And every day they thought there's going to be none left. And every day there was more. And God provided it for them. Because even in that really horrible, awful place, they trusted him and they followed him. Jim Elliot was a missionary who went to South America, and he and his friends who went with him were killed because they went to try and tell people about God. Later on, his wife and other family members went back and spoke to the people who had killed their husband and father because they followed God and they trusted him. Most people don't have the chance to do big things like that, but you can still inspire other people simply by trusting God. I remember when we used to live in Inverness, there was a wee couple, a wee old man and woman. They were just ordinary folk. That is until they started to pray. And when they started to pray, it was as if God had come into the room. Because they'd spent so much time talking to God and listening to God and following God. And if you just met them in the street, you would never know. But when they began to pray, they were a huge inspiration to anybody who heard them. And then we have Scripture. Scripture is another word for the Bible. And we know about Jesus because of what is written in the Bible. In John chapter 21, John, one of the 12 disciples, wrote this. Jesus did lots of other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world wouldn't have room for the books that would need to be written. They could have written loads and loads of things about Jesus. So that probably means that what they did actually write is important, and we should pay attention to it. As Christians, we believe that the Bible is inspired, that God took people and used them to write the things that we needed to know. And then, Christ is another title, another name for Jesus. So in the Bible, we learn what Jesus did and what he said. We learn why he did it. We believe that Jesus was both human and God, that he was a man, but he was also God. We believe that he was born in Bethlehem. We believe that he was crucified, that he was buried in a cave, but that he didn't stay dead. He rose from the dead and was seen by hundreds and hundreds of people. And even today, we believe that he is alive. And then, we should be interested. We should be interested in finding out what God is doing and joining in. We should be looking to see what's happening in the world around us and in people around us and saying, is God doing something there? And how can we help? Disciples should be interested in what's happening in other places in the world as well, so that we can pray and we can give support. That's part of what we do with our Christian aid stuff. We're helping other people around the world. We should be interested in our own community so that we can help people to get to know Jesus for themselves. And then we should be prayerful. One of the things that Jesus did most was pray. Do you know, before he chose these 12, he spent the night praying. It was really important to him, and it should be really important to us. To pray means that we talk to God, and there are lots of different ways to do that. You can do it really quietly, or you can be really loud. You can stand, you can sit, you can have your hands up or your hands down, you can lie on the floor, you can, whatever you like. All sorts of different ways that you can pray. You can write or draw or sing, or you can just spend time listening to hear from God. You can do all sorts of things in order to speak to God, whatever way you find best to do it. You can close your eyes, you can keep them open. It doesn't really matter how you do it, just that you do it. Because that's how we get to know God. It's how you get to know your friends. You spend time with them and you talk to them. Sometimes it's on a pad or a phone. But sometimes we actually do it face to face nowadays, even nowadays. But it takes time. It requires communication. It requires you to talk to each other. And it's the same with God. You have to talk to God and you have to listen for God speaking too. And then we have loving. Disciples should be loving because God is love. And that's what he said. That the best and greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and your neighbor as yourself. So we're meant to love each other and we're meant to love other people. And then we're supposed to have lots of yeah, it's very hot. And not just our energy that comes from God. In a couple of weeks, we're going to think about Pentecost, and that was when the Holy Spirit came into the world in a way that had never happened before. And when God says, come and follow me, and we say, yes, I'm going to follow you, God gives us his Holy Spirit. And it's the Holy Spirit that helps us to live for God and to be the kind of people that God expects us to be. So do you know what? I want to say to you boys and girls that if we, as folk in this congregation, as leaders in Boys or Girls Brigade, or me as minister, or any of the adults, have shown you or given you the idea in what we've said or what we've done that being a disciple is a dull, boring, awful thing, then I want to say sorry to you for that. And I want to ask for your forgiveness for that, because it shouldn't be. Being a disciple should be the best decision that you've ever made. It should be a life-changing decision. It should enable you to encounter God in ways that you've never done before, to engage with other people in ways that you've never done before. It's the best thing that I have ever done, and I know there's other folk in this congregation that would say the same. It should never be dull. It should never be boring. It should be an adventure. Now, it will not always be the adventures of earthquakes and falling walls and buildings shaking when you pray and all that kind of stuff, but it's an adventure nevertheless. And so if we've given you a different view or opinion, then I'm sorry for that. We don't always get it right. We don't, because we're human. We make mistakes and we get it wrong. But I wouldn't change that decision that I made to follow Jesus for anything. And I would encourage you all to do the same. Amen.